6 years and back in Southern California. So we were in La Habra for, about 10 years, 11 years before we moved up here.
I lived in Chula Vista and Anaheim for about 8 years.
Nice. There you go.
Mikey was born in Chula Vista.
Yeah, good. All right, we'll give this another minute or so. We're still waiting for a couple more council members to join us here.
I think we got everybody but Chris, right?
I only see you and Larry and Yolanda.
No,
Chris is here.
Robin is there.
Okay, James and Chris. Robin's here. Robin's there.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, they're not showing on my screen. So, okay, good.
Everyone's here.
All right, great. We'll go ahead and get started. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our City Council study session for July 26, 2021. I will call this meeting to order. And per Governor Inslee's emergency proclamation 20-05 and 20-28, and stay safe, stay healthy. The City of Auburn is holding public meetings virtually at this time. City of Auburn Resolution number 5581 designates the City of Auburn meeting locations for our regular, special, and study session meetings in the City Council and of the committees, boards, and commissions of the city as virtual locations until Washington's governor authorizes local governments to conduct in-person meetings. Sean, will you please call the roll?
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Here.
Councilmember Baggett.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember J. Raj.
I'm here.
Councilmember Malinga.
Here.
Councilmember Stern.
Here.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Here.
All right, thank you. Okay, everyone, tonight, first on our agenda is going to be our community wellness discussion items. So at this time, I will turn the meeting over to Councilmember Malinga. Councilmember.
Yolanda, can you introduce this one for us, please? I need to get my iPad open. I'm sorry.
Sure. I will be turning it over to Jeff Tate.
Good evening, Council, Deputy Mayor, and Mayor. I'm going to turn the mic over real quickly to Joy Scott, our Community Services Manager, who's going to facilitate this panel presentation for the next hour or so.
Thanks so much, and thank you, Council, for having me. I appreciate being here this evening. My name is Joy Scott, and I am the Community Services Manager here at City of Auburn. Is everybody able to hear me okay? Okay, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation here. We are here this evening to provide you with a mid-year update on the Human Services Program, and it's going to look a little bit different this year than some years past. Usually you are only hearing from staff for these presentations, but especially given the virtual environment that we are in, we really wanted to make an effort to have a little bit more of an engaging presentation and also to put some agencies in front of you, since we haven't had all of the in-person interactions with them out in the community that we would normally have had over the past year and a half. So I'm going to go through just a little bit of data and a little bit of background on human services prior to handing it off to some of our agency presenters who'll be able to share some information with you about their programs, what they're seeing, how they serve Auburn residents, and also have some opportunity for questions and answers. So this is a slide that I think you all are very familiar with at this point. I am generally in front of council talking about one of two funding sources. So tonight we are talking about our general fund human services dollars. This is for the 2021 and 2022 budget years, $680,000 that support funding for direct services by nonprofit agencies for residents of Auburn. These funding contracts are guided by the Human Services funding priorities and approved by City Council every other year during the budget process. So our Human Services program is small but mighty. We have a competitive application process to nonprofit agencies that provide direct services, and we currently manage contracts for 50 programs across all of our contracts. 39 of those are for our general fund contracts, but we also oversee currently the additional funding that was made available for COVID relief from CDBG, as well as our regular CDBG funds that we put towards public services. Within our contract management, it includes oversight of the agencies and the work that they're doing, including reporting and invoicing, also regular monitoring of contracted agencies. That looks a little bit different currently than it has in years past, because typically we are on site for that monitoring, but we've been doing more desktop monitoring and digital with folks to just be more accessible and more COVID safe. We also provide support for agencies to identify and overcome barriers to service provision. We also try to facilitate collaborative efforts and really support holistic approaches to meeting human service needs in the community. So we have groups that we facilitate that help support collaboration and capacity building for nonprofit agencies. We also try to make trainings available to our agencies, especially when we hear trends of trainings that might be needed across multiple entities. We facilitate a monthly South King County Forum on Homelessness meeting of providers, and also facilitate a monthly rental assistance providers roundtable. That has been especially important in the past year, as there have been so many sources of rental assistance coming online that collaborating has become both more complex and also more important during these times. We work really closely with regional partners, and we also are part of a common human services application process shared by 16 King County cities, really trying to make the process of agencies applying for funding from a city as streamlined as possible, and really trying to reduce burdens whenever possible on our nonprofit partners. So some of the background of what we're prioritizing right now in human services is that in early 2019, the city hired Cloudburst Consulting to complete a community needs assessment that would guide human service funding priorities over the following 5 years. We had budgeted for that 2 years prior in 2017, and we were able to actually have that go underway in the spring of 2019. The community needs assessment was completed in the fall, and you might recall it came in front of council and was adopted by resolution by the council in late fall of 2019. That recommendation included both our priority funding areas, which you'll see in just a moment, and also how much money we should be setting aside for each area proportionately to try and reconfigure how we were approaching our community's biggest needs. So the final priority areas, and you'll be hearing from an agency that's representative of each one of these priority areas in the panel this evening. One of them was housing and associated services. So you'll see these kind of full descriptions on the screen in front of you and in your packet. But these are programs that provide ongoing housing or rental assistance and supportive services. So these are really wraparound services that meet folks where they are and provide a variety of supports depending on what that family needs to remain stably housed. Programs that fall in this category could include things like transitional housing, that is that housing with some ongoing supports. It could also include rapid rehousing, and you'll hear an example of that later this evening. Our second priority area was homelessness interventions, and these are programs that are specifically reaching folks that are experiencing homelessness currently, really trying to resolve their housing challenges, housing problems. So looking at shorter term light touch models like diversion or rapid exit from shelter, but really meeting folks where they are while experiencing homelessness to meet those needs. We have our housing related supportive services categories, which include housing related basic needs, things like eviction prevention, utility assistance, short-term interventions like shelter or storage and laundry, hygiene facilities needs, and homelessness prevention supports are also within the housing related supportive services. And then our last two categories are not specifically housing focused. It's our basic needs, which is programs that include things like food access, youth programming, domestic violence services, physical or behavioral health, childcare, immigration, legal supports, things like that. It's a really broad category. But what our consultants had found was that the majority of our funding was going towards this category, while we were seeing the majority of increasing needs in the housing categories that we weren't specifically setting aside those direct allocations for. So that's why there was this recommendation and why Council directed that we move in this direction back in 2019. And our final category is job training and education, which is pretty self-explanatory, but you'll hear a great example of that later this evening as well. So just to provide some funding updates for the 2021 contract year, just a reminder, to be eligible for funding, agencies have to meet one of our funding priorities. They do have to be a nonprofit agency, so they have to have that 501c3 status or have that ready to be in place by the time they are funded. They have to have a non-discrimination policy, meet minimum insurance requirements, and be able to manage all of the administrative burdens that come along with having that contract. So accepting reimbursements for funds based on service unit, that requires that they put the dollars out first themselves and then get reimbursed for them. And also ensure that they are timely in completing their reports, that they undergo monitoring, that they keep records in a particular way, things like that. So you can see kind of the breakdown of how our programs were funded and contracted in the 2021-2022 budget year. So we do 2-year human services contracts. We set aside about $184,000 to go towards homelessness interventions, $177,000 towards housing and associated services, $158,500 towards basic needs, $95,500 towards housing related supportive services, and then $65,000 towards job training and education. And this is very closely in line with what those target percentages of funding were. You can see that we put a little bit more towards basic needs than what the target percentage was, and that was because of the overwhelming proportion of applications that we received for that category. And then you can see this is a slide that I think you're familiar with. It came in front of you last year when we were describing our expected contracts for the years, but this is just the breakdown of types of programs. You can see that we really fund a broad range of programs, really try to make a variety of services available for Auburn residents through the Human Services Program. So just a few statistics before I turn it over to our speakers for the evening. We have 39 programs that are currently funded through the General Fund Human Services Program. Between January 1st and June 30th of 2021, those programs reported serving 9,089 Auburn residents across all programs, providing 3,818 bed nights. So that is in the context of shelter, 1 night spent in a shelter bed is 1 bed night. So if you have 2 people in a shelter setting for 5 nights, that's a 10 bed nights total. 791 case management sessions were provided. 563 Auburn residents received eviction prevention financial resources, and that's a huge increase from where we've been in years past. This is partially due to us kind of reformulating how much funding we're prioritizing for things like homelessness prevention services. And 33 Auburn residents were enrolled in job training services. You can see that we have exceeded a number of our annual goals already at the mid-year point. This is because of really seeing an increased need, and also our agencies responding phenomenally to what they were seeing in the community. So our target for number of bed nights that we would hope to be at this time of the year would be around 1,800, but we are actually already exceeding our annual goal for the number of bed nights that agencies are providing with these dollars. You can also see that we are almost at our year-to-date goal for case management sessions as well. So in terms of the return on investment that we're seeing, our residents are really getting a significant amount of services and much more than we had originally anticipated. You'll also see our kind of annual goal figures versus where we are year to date for eviction prevention, for the number of individuals receiving rental assistance, and for the individuals enrolled in job training. Both of these annual goals have already been exceeded across the contracts that we have for these programs. So we're really excited to be where we are today, to see such great and deep engagement by our agencies doing such good work with Auburn residents. I'm going to stop my slide sharing for a moment so that I can introduce you to who we have this evening. So we are excited to have this panel presentation for you. I anticipate that folks will be really interested, really engaged, and also potentially have a lot of questions for our speakers. So I am hoping that for the sake of being able to keep you to your to our time that we have set aside, and also to not have you staying in a study session meeting until 10 p.m., that we can hold all questions for all of our panelists until all of them have completed. They're each going to be providing about a 5 to 7 minute overview of their agency's programs and how they're serving Auburn residents. And then we have built in ample time for Q&A after they've provided that. So our first presenter that we have is Angela Dannenbring from Dawn, and she's going to be sharing more information about what their agency does to support domestic violence survivors and our Auburn community.
Hello, good evening, council members. It's an honor to be here this evening to present on our organization. My name is Angela Dannenbring, and I'm the Executive Director of the Domestic Abuse Women's Network. Dawn has been around now for 41 years, and our roots started with just helping and assisting through crisis line and finding shelter for individuals fleeing domestic violence. Currently, 41 years later, we are throughout South King County and King County, serving within housing programs, community advocacy, and prevention. We have legal advocacy, mobile advocacy, youth advocacy. We also are part of the Child Domestic Violence Response Team, so CDVRT. We assist with families and find resources in our community. And we also have a 13-bed emergency shelter. We host mental health services for internal referral, and really have been able to provide a holistic wraparound model. I joined Dawn in June of 2019, so I am coming up on my 2 years here in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, and it's been an honor to serve as their leader. I just wanted to kind of provide some overview. Like I mentioned, we host domestic violence institutes and also some community education. We also really have expanded our abilities to provide trainings both to other nonprofits, businesses, and most recently last year, teen programming, as we saw an interesting pattern of youth calling our crisis line. And so we were able to adapt and change to that model and continue to provide resources to help build that awareness, starting from middle school, the 6th grade, going up to senior year in high school. Last year, Dawn provided 21,799 life-saving services to domestic violence survivors. 7,124 of those services for safe bed nights to women and children fleeing domestic violence. We also answered 3,830 crisis line calls, and we're able to provide over 253 clients with food through our marketplace program. This year, as we continue to serve, but also just for the focus of tonight with Auburn residents, we have always enjoyed our longstanding partnership, and currently, currently with the community advocacy program, we're at 841 case management hours and 250 bed nights through our emergency shelter. Dawn continues this year at our midpoint to provide services through our Domestic Violence Institute and also help with training, both through requested trainings that are tailored, but also looking at our shelter and how we can expand those services as we start to see the uptick that I think a lot of human services agencies were anticipating. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Angela. All right, and next up to provide a little bit of a program overview, we have Ryan from Mary's Place. And Ryan, I will be screen sharing on your behalf with your PowerPoint. So just let me know when you would like me to advance the slides for you.
Awesome, thank you, Joy. Thank you, council members, for inviting me tonight. My name is Ryan Dish-Guzman. I'm the Outreach and Diversion Director here at Mary's Place. I oversee our programming with unsheltered families. And I'm just going to go over the services that we offer Auburn residents in our programming. You can go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So one of the things that we like to say is we offer shelter tonight and then the housing tomorrow. So we have 5 24/7 family shelters with wraparound services with just over 500 beds each night. We partner with over 40 social service agencies in the community. Within those services, we have housing specialists that work with families on housing locators that work with partner properties, employment services to help families find jobs and financial stability. Our mobile outreach team that works with unsheltered families that are either that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness in King County or fleeing domestic violence. And we're working on building out our programming to help make sure that families stay safe and stable in housing going forward. Next slide, thank you. The growth of our services, we just wanted to give you an idea of how our services have grown over the past few years. As you can see, in 2012, we had just over 7,000 overnight stays, and now we've ranged from 179,000, almost 180,000 to 141,000 between 2018 and 2020. Families moved into housing. In 2019, we had that high of 416 and then down to 273. That's probably because of a reduction in our shelter beds due to COVID. And then families moved to housing from unsheltered homelessness, 353, 300, originally 126. So we see this trend line growing throughout our communities. Next slide. So during COVID, we had to do what we call de-intensification, which meant that we had to take all of these protocols. That meant that we lost 300 shelter beds that we previously had. King County shelter providers reported decreased turnover. So newly announced shelter capacity was not provided for families in Seattle and King County. So there was more of an emphasis on chronically homeless individuals. So we still do not have the shelter bed access that we used to, and we're struggling to gain that back. We believe the community as a whole needs to make investments in best practices for keeping families housed and out of shelter, but we also need to increase our bed capacity because there's a very high need. Next slide, please. So we've invested in a diversion approach, which is low barrier funding. It's a national best practice. So it's working with families to identify barriers and developing housing solutions so that hopefully they don't need to come into shelter because there is such a high need for shelter. We use this flexible funding. The average is about $1,800 per family. It's used for things like move-in costs, car repairs, IDs, birth certificates to get them into essential services. That low barrier funding allows families to access that safe housing. Next slide, please. So we also manage the emergency family intake line for King County. The need is high. Only 38% of families calling get shelter because we do not have enough shelter beds as it is right now in the county. COVID has changed the way we provide shelter. It's closed smaller sites, flexible funding strategies to keep family out of shelter. We're trying to make sure we can reach that capacity. One of the fears we have is that the end of the eviction moratorium will be devastating for families in our area. Next slide, please. So specifically to Auburn, we've served in 2019 and 2020, 154 families called for services from Auburn. That's about 6% of all calls from King County. So these are unsheltered families or families fleeing DV. 51 families from Auburn were helped through mobile outreach services. That's with our mobile specialists that work out in the field and do street outreach with unsheltered families. 47 families from Auburn came within our emergency shelter, and 90 of those families that we worked with were able to get permanent housing in the city of Auburn. I don't know if there's another slide. I think that's it. But thank you for giving me the time tonight to speak on what we do and how we partner with you all.
Thanks so much, Ryan. And up next, we have Laura from Solid Ground's Journey Home Rapid Rehousing Program. And Laura, I will also be sharing your slides, so just let me know when to move to the next one.
Great. Thank you so much, Joy. So my name is Laura. I work with Solid Ground. We're an organization who's been around for quite some time, I think about 47 years. We have a breadth of experience in housing and homelessness response programs, hunger and food resources, benefits legal assistance. We partner with King County Access Transportation, and we also manage the statewide Poverty Action Network. I represent, thanks Joy, our Journey Home Rapid Rehousing Program. So a little background on that program. Journey Home has been in existence for 20 years. The model has changed here and there throughout the years, but throughout its time, we've maintained the housing first philosophy. What that means is that we believe that people have a right to be in housing and really do better in the comfort and safety of your own home. So there aren't preconditions to enroll in our program. Folks don't have to have income initially. We work on all of those things once folks are housed. There aren't requirements for housing readiness. We provide individualized supports, prioritizing client choice and self-determination along the way. When it comes to eligibility and referral, as with all rapid rehousing programs locally, it's pretty minimal eligibility criteria. We look for folks who are experiencing HUD category 1 and 4 homelessness, which means that they're living in emergency shelter, in a place not fit for human habitation, in a hotel paid for by a third party, or fleeing domestic violence. And then families is my default word because our program works just with families. So looking for folks with minor children in their custody, people who might not have kids in custody now, but are working toward reunification with CPS, and then pregnant mothers. Can you move to the next slide? Rapid housing interventions generally happen in kind of like a 3-phased approach. So it's a pretty intensive model. We're working with some of the most vulnerable families in the community. And our initial focus in the first phase is housing search and barriers resolution. And when we're talking about barriers resolution, we're looking at what are the things that are going to keep a landlord from approving your tenancy. A common one is prior landlord debt. A lot of landlords will automatically screen out if you have landlord debt on your record. So we have funding available and trained staff to help to negotiate down debts and pay those debts so that we can remove them from folks' records. We also have a landlord engagement specialist on our team whose job is to be kind of that landlord-facing role, building relationships and advocating with landlords to consider tenancy for our participants. We partner with Housing Connector, who is an intermediary agency that works with landlords who are willing to reduce their screening criteria for participants in programs like ours in exchange for increased supports from the organization and from our organization. Once we're successful in finding housing and improving approval for tenancy, we move into that next phase of providing move-in supports and making sure that families just have the material needs and financial supports to be able to get into housing safely. We conduct housing inspections conducted by our trained landlord engagement specialist to make sure that housing is safe and habitable. We're not sending folks to places that have signs of lead-based paint. And we can provide income or financial assistance as well as moving services, linkage to furniture and beds, everything we can think of to really help with that stabilizing support. And then phase 3 is what we're calling housing stabilization. And that's kind of the longest part of our program intervention. We provide a wraparound model with a progressive engagement lens, looking to increase supports as needed, tailoring to the family's individual needs. Every housing stability plan looks a little bit different because every family's needs are different. And our model, along with other rapid rehousing programs in the community, follows an income-based rent assistance model where we're providing 100% of moving costs at upfront and then an increasing stair step that's based on the family's income after that. We can advance. Like everyone else reporting here, we're all reporting on COVID-19 impacts because we all really felt the weight of this pandemic last year. Our program, being an income-based rental model, we really saw our biggest struggle, I think, was families losing employment pretty quickly. And then our program has stepped in to pay increased rent costs. We were funding 1.5 to 2 times our typical budget through last year. As a result, we ended up halting new referrals, which was a tragedy in and of itself, just so that we could focus on keeping the families who were on our caseloads housed in their housing. Parents weren't able to work due to virtual schooling and needing to be home to supervise their kids. It resulted in us having a much longer average length of stay with our participants than usual, but also led to us being able to be more creative and flexible with some of our funds. We purchased computers, printers, help pay for car repairs, emergency hotel stays, a lot of things we didn't really get to do before that I hope get to stay around now that we have this increased flexibility. And then we're a new provider with City of Auburn, and that partnership with Auburn in particular made a big impact on us this year, getting to expand our typical budget and kind of soften the blow of the enduring pandemic this year. Then we can move to the next slide. And then just a few program statistics year to date. We're a smaller program compared to hearing from Mary's Place being a more intensive isolated model. This year we've worked with 60 families from January until the end of June. 8 of those families were in the City of Auburn. We have a region-wide program, so a pretty high percentage of our families are in Auburn considering that. 82% of our families graduating the program during this time period exited into permanent housing with a lease in their name, and 0% of the families who exited the program last year returned during this reporting period to homelessness. I'm really proud of those outcomes and hope those continue. Thank you so much.
Joy, you're muted.
I'm so sorry about that. You think that I would have it figured out by now. Thank you so much, Laura, for that presentation. Next up, we have Adria from MultiService Center. I'm going to pull up those slides as well, but Adria is going to be talking to us about the Economic Stability Department's Rental and Emergency Utility Assistance Program.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Adria Kitt with the MultiService Center, and I'm the housing case manager. Good to talk with all of you this evening. The MultiService Center does rental and emergency utility assistance program for South King County. The cities that we work in, if you want to scroll down for me. Okay, so our cities that we do assistance in is Auburn, Kent, Renton, SeaTac, Federal Way, Berrien, Tukwila, and Des Moines. We also have our own MSC property in Pierce County called Fern Hill, and we do they give us private referrals for our residents that are in Pierce County. We are able to assist families once a calendar year. With the COVID, we've kind of changed that. We've assisted some families through multiple programs at MSC. We do have a COVID-19 emergency assistance, some funds there, so we can use regular rental assistance funds and COVID-19 funds to assist families that we wouldn't normally assist maybe twice a year, but because of how times are so uncertain, we decided that we needed to open that availability up to help more clients in those needed areas. Clients can also, what can customers access by engaging in our programs? Clients can access other programs such as food bank, educational services, and employment services. offered by MSC. We have community alliances with other organizations that may able to also assist the client if MSC is unable to assist. So we don't leave the client looking and saying, what do I do next? As everyone has been using the term wraparound, we look at MSC. If we are unable to help them at MSC for whatever reason, we look for the next organization. We look for the next outlet that we can help this person find and gain some assistance. We do not just turn anyone away and say, hey, I'm sorry, we can't help you. Please call, someone else. But we give them, case manager names. We give them organization names. We give them as many opportunities as possible to find the assistance. The client will be helped to the fullest of our abilities at MSC and be treated with respect, kindness, and understanding. I think one of the hardest things for people to do is to step out of their comfort zone and to ask for assistance or help. A lot of people just have a hard time with that. And I really let my clients know that this is the reason why we are here. These are the reasons why we have these programs, because at some point in time, everyone will need some type of assistance, no matter which way it comes. So some of the eligibility criteria and documents that you need to have for us to offer the assistance is we look for verification of income. We like to get pay stubs as current as possible, 30 to 60 days, award letters for SSI or TANF, child support. If 18 and older, if no income, then we have what we call a zero income affidavit. Just because you don't have income coming in doesn't mean that we're not going to help you. We have what we call a zero income affidavit. There are so many reasons why people don't have income coming in at this time that, we really want to make a place for them to get assistance no matter what situation they might be in at the time. So for each of the clients and the families that we help, there are certain documents that we need. Photo ID, if they don't have that, passport or alien cards are acceptable. Driver's license. We also ask for social security cards. You don't have to have a social security card to get assistance from us either. That is not something that we're going to hold against you if a client doesn't have social security card. We just, if they do, we would like that number, but if they don't, we take other things to identify the clients. We take passport card numbers. We also take alien card numbers. And so we just have a multiple ways of trying to help the client, even if the documentation isn't everything that we are requesting. We ask for the full lease of the apartment complex or the dwelling that they are in, and we ask for the ledger. We want to always ask for what we call the rental ledger, showing what the client is owing at this time, because we want to help them as best as we can. And sometimes clients, and I hate to say it, but they think, if they say, I only owe, $2,000, they're going to be guaranteed the assistance. But when we get the ledger, we see that they truly owe maybe $7,500. And so we really like to let them know, the amount that you're owing at this time is not going to stop you from possibly getting the assistance. But we want them to know just to be honest and upfront with us as possible, so that we know what we're looking at and we can get ready to see what we can do to assist them. I do very little, but I do have funding for energy assistance. Most of my clients that I do deal with, though, are rental assistance, but I can help clients in all of those cities that I named with energy assistance also, except for the city of Kent. We are directly only rental assistance for the city of Kent. The referral process and information that customers can access us or any of you. We have the rental assistance hotline, which will be open the first Tuesday of every month. This will be beginning in September, and it is open from 9 to 12 p.m. And that's the number on the screen there. And then we also have rental applications. And those are also opened up on the 1st of the month. And that is for every city that we serve. And we try and take 3 to 4 applications per city. And we try and help each one of those for each client. And so these are just the guiding principles that drives what we do at MSC. One of, again, I mentioned one of the hardest things for me or as a customer to do is ask for the assistance. So we like to always let them know that we are open and we are here for you, and we are going to do the best of our abilities to move you forward into a better situation than you are in now. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Adria. Really appreciate that. And our final presentation this evening is from our job training and education priority area. And we have, I believe, Diane and Kathy here with us this evening from Orion. And I will put your slides up in just one moment.
Thank you.
Feel free to take it away.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for the opportunity to tell you about how Orion supports Auburn and the surrounding communities. My name is Diane Lyons, and I am the Director of Development at Orion. You can advance the slide, please. At Orion, we believe everyone should have the opportunity to work. We offer hope and create paths to employment through building esteem, mentoring, training, education, community services, and successful businesses. Next slide. Orion is a 501c3 social enterprise organization. We were founded in 1957 by parents of children with disabilities. Orion was created with the intent of providing skills so that their children could be self-sufficient and independent. And it's still our goal to provide opportunities to people with barriers to employment so that they may experience independence. Next slide. We use our award-winning aerospace manufacturing businesses to provide hands-on training opportunities while maintaining the highest quality standards in both our Auburn and Mukilteo locations. We manufacture over 1.5 million parts annually and hold ourselves to the highest standards of performance, quality, and safety. In fact, our quality metrics are at 99.94%. Next slide. Our training and employment program enables participants to successfully gain and retain employment through paid skills training, vocational assessments, and counseling, job development services, community job matches, and retention services. People with disabilities are 3 times more likely than people without disabilities to live below the poverty line. They participate in the U.S. workforce at a rate of only 17.9%. Disabilities can be one barrier to employment, but there are many others. People may experience a variety of obstacles, including homelessness, lack of education, or justice involvement. And when coupled with a disability, the path to independence is even more difficult. We help them find this path to independence through work. And you can see by the diagram here that there are a variety of barriers that can contribute to lack of employment and lack of financial security, in addition to a variety of different disabilities that may be compounded. Next slide. All of our programs are based on our proven winning traits skills. These are the skills a person learns while in our program and continue and contribute significantly to maintaining successful long-term employment. Mastery of these skills also contribute to building confidence and self-esteem. These skills are reinforced through one-on-one mentoring, vocational counseling, and job development throughout their program. Vocational counseling. Every participant in our program is assigned a vocational counselor when they enter the program, and this counselor tracks their progress, their training, and also assesses their strengths. They provide case management services, set performance goals and vocational goals in partnership with the participants. They identify a participant's strengths and focus on how a participant can best use those strengths in the workplace. They really are our client's best advocate. Once a participant is ready to seek a job outside of Orion, our job developers work closely with them, providing guidance and appropriate job matches with employers in the community. They assist our participants with resume writing, job searches, completing applications, and interview preparation. And the job developers help to connect them with employers where they can be successful long-term. We're currently placing participants in jobs with an average starting wage of $16.25 an hour, which is a little different than what this slide shows, a little bit higher. And most are full-time jobs with benefits. In 2019, we served 72 Auburn residents. In 2020, we served 54 Auburn residents. And in 2021, we are on track to serve even more participants. So far in 2021, we've served 39 residents of Auburn. Each dollar invested in our program yields a $3 return on the investment due to the reduced dependency on social service programs and increased earning power of participants who now pay into the tax system. Next slide. We do rely on word of mouth referrals from past participants and also the community at large. So we encourage you to tell all your friends about our program and encourage you to share the information about the work that we're doing here in Auburn and also in Mukilteo. And I thank you for the opportunity to share about this unique and successful program right here in your community, which provides residents the opportunity and a path to work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diane. And thank you to all of our panelists so far this evening. We do have some time for questions from council, but I just want to take a moment to really provide huge thanks, huge props to all of our human service agencies that have been operating in increasingly complex, challenging, really difficult situations on the ground, responding to increased needs from the pandemic, and really having to employ huge amounts of creativity, flexibility, and dedication to be able to be in the community and be present the way that they have been, especially over the 18 months. So I know that I am incredibly grateful to get to work with our agencies every day in my role, and really appreciate not only you being here this evening, but also all of the work that you are doing. So I will open the floor for any questions that folks might have for any of our panelists.
Thank you so much, Joy and Jeff, for having all the folks come in today to do presentations for us. I think we really learned a lot. And we want to thank all the folks that presented today. Thank you so much for your time. I wanted to open it up for questions from our council members. So I'll take a quick look and see. Oh, I see a lot of hands raised. I don't know who was first, so I'm just going to go by who I see on my screen. So Council Member Stearns, you're going to go ahead and start with your question.
Thank you, Council Member. Yeah, I'm not sure if I was first or not, but I'll take it, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you know, the work that, you know, all of you are doing here in Auburn is just absolutely amazing. You know, there's such a important human rights component to this, you know, that ultimately you're helping people live with dignity and giving people hope, which is, you know, priceless. And I'm just so grateful for everything you're doing here in Auburn, and you know, whatever we can do to help. I had a question for Joy. Do you, you know, do you foresee using an equity lens as we develop it here in the city, applying that lens to the human services grant distribution process?
Yeah, thanks so much. It's an excellent question. And I can talk a little bit about some of the things that we've started to put into place and also say that this is a continually evolving process. And we are always working to improve. And I also have Kyla Wright with me here this evening, our Human Services Program Coordinator. So I'll let her jump in if I leave anything out. So just to highlight a couple of the things that we're doing, there are questions within the common application that really seek to address equity in service delivery and in outcomes. So we do have questions that we ask agencies to address of how they are meeting needs equitably, how they are serving folks that are most disproportionately impacted by issues in our community, and how their services are accessible and inclusive. We also have instituted a pilot program in our human services grant program this year. It is brand new and we've been really excited to do it. We're starting out just with our highest funded agencies. So agencies that have contracts that exceed, I believe it's $25,000. We have built in a requirement for their staff, both direct service staff and kind of decision-making higher level staff at the agency to implement and undergo training related to an area of equity that makes sense for them in their service delivery. And that could be around implicit bias. It could be about, harm reduction and certainly a number of different opportunities to incorporate greater racial equity training, but we're also providing funding for it. So in addition to, ensuring that training is occurring, we're providing up to $1,000 per year of reimbursable funding for agencies so that the cost of that training is not a barrier to them being able to access it. We also work with our Human Services Committee and we provide some equity training there so that when they are reading and scoring applications that they have had kind of exposure to being able to understand how bias plays a role in that and how to, as much as possible, do kind of bias-free scoring. And we are collaborating with our neighboring cities to bring larger equity trainings to both our Human Services Committee and we collaborate on staff training as well. So there's still lots of opportunity to come and there's a lot of things that we can do going forward, but those are some of the things we've been working on so far.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful, thanks. Just along those lines then, do you ask our grantees to track demographics, race, age, veteran status, things like that?
We do. That is required, and we gather it on an annual basis for the full program year of demographics. And part of the way that we use that is to see if there are folks that across all agencies are really being missed or not being served, and to try and address that within how we are advertising our application process and how we're reaching out to agencies when we are within that initial funding stage.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Trout Manuel, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Director Tate and Joyce, thank you for bringing this wonderful panel to us. And some of you I already remember from several years ago. Angela from Dawn, nice to see you again. And it's also nice to hear what you're doing and how many of our Auburn residents you have been servicing, the rest of you as well. I'm really glad to meet you. And I've served on the the Wellness Committee for several years, and it's nice to see you join our Auburn team, and you're doing wonderful jobs. I also wanted to talk to Diana. My neighbor, young man, is 22 years old, and you folks hired him, and he's learning how to be independent, and his parents are so grateful for you guys to hire him and teaching him what he's learning there. So thank you very much. But just continue doing the great work that you're doing and serving our women and men and children in our Auburn. And I know I will continue supporting you guys. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you, Councilmember Merlinga. Question for Ryan. Ryan, in your presentation, you mentioned the somewhat dilemma, I guess you might say, we may be facing once the eviction moratorium ends. Are you seeing people having knowledge, understanding of the programs that are been made available for rental assistance, and also for those that are currently housed who may be rent burdened, the payment of existing rent coming up, as well as perhaps payments to make up back rent, could be overwhelming for them, and they may not be able to survive that financially. Has anything in the works been done to address those issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so in the second quarter of this year, we saw a 30% increase in referrals. And so those are all, families who are unsheltered. And a good chunk of those referrals came in last month in June, when we still were unclear if the eviction moratorium would be extended or not for the state. And I think those were a lot of families that were leaving their existing living situations because they were scared of just the amount that they would be forced to pay back, and really unclear of their rights as tenants. And so we saw them leave their existing housing and become homeless. I think there's a lot of confusion over what their rights are and the existing rental assistance supports that are there, because it's a confusing process right now. And as we know, the county's not fully set up. So a lot of families are understandably scared, and we're seeing a lot of that. We recently had a family that had a $21,000 housing debt. That's been difficult to negotiate and help get them into housing as they're unsheltered. So it's really unclear going forward how big the surge will be. We know there will be a surge of referrals. We don't know how big it will be. Our agency itself is setting up a prevention program for our programming as well, to make sure that hopefully we can meet that need, especially when we get to August, when families are looking at being someplace stable for their kids to enroll in school. So that's what we're looking into. And I can't announce anything yet, but it's like we are developing that out and hopefully have that in place for the fall. So we see the need, and we're trying to meet that need.
Right. Thank you very much for all the work you're doing, and everybody else as well. Thank you.
Councilmember J-Raj, do you have a question?
Thank you, Councilmember Malenga. I just want to thank everybody on the panel today for coming and sharing the stuff that you do for our community. I have a two-part question, and I'm not sure if Orion would fall into that, but let's see. You guys can take it individually. I don't know how you want to do it, but I like to hear from everybody if possible. So how about the undocumented folks? How do you support them and help them with their shelters and their needs? And the second part of it is, now the state is going to be lifting the moratorium here soon, and we would possibly face an influx of people who have needs. And how are you folks going to mitigate that? Diane, Angela, you can start with it if you like. You got your hands up.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you. To answer your question, the first part, within Dawn, we do a couple things. We do have an identified immigration advocate that assists through processing, whether it's the U visa process or working with gathering documentation or finding options. We also partner with the Northwest Immigration Project to kind of help with some of those higher level that we don't always do because we just have one staff identified. And so we do a lot of warm handoff or a lot of partnership between both our agency and theirs. But we have identified an advocate that specifically works within the immigration field, as well as kind of a second hat per se through legal advocacy, much that we see a lot of pattern and trends where there are protection orders needed or additional guidelines that they are having going on. And then we also partner with the legal lawyer aspect through ELAP. And so we also provide clients to connect to law representation, since our legal advocates and immigration advocates really kind of help with the support of listening and resources and processing, some of the documents needed for next steps. But then if they do need different types of legal representation, we do that through ELAP. On the second part of it, I think that's a pretty continued discussion that I've been seeing in provider meetings. A couple things at hand now is really just getting the information out to our clients. I think, as our virtual world continues, while we see a lot of ability for survivors to obtain links or ability to log on, not all have the safety or the means to do so. So really utilizing community meetings to get them the information of the rental assistance, depending on what city they live in. And then also just helping them make some calls on their behalf is a lot of what I'm seeing our community mobile advocates doing. We also look at kind of our partnerships, what we can do to help with rental assistance, what we are seeing through ARPA funds, and just kind of keeping our finger on the pulse of that. I think one of the biggest things I saw from a nonprofit lens last year through my role was the sustainable funds that came through the CARES Act and how many clients we were able to help just kind of, for lack of better words, skip some of those steps and just go straight to sustainable housing. Sometimes the first month rent deposit is very large for our clients. And then when you add, like I'm hearing other members of the panel discuss some of those large debts, so to speak, that they're trying to negotiate, it gets to be a lot of hoops. So I feel like in some of the provider meetings I've been a part of is kind of that three-prong approach, like who does have openings to assist for the emergency placement? What type of rental assistance and funds are there, and how can we get those into communities? And how can we help them kind of understand the steps? Because some of the paperwork involved is cumbersome for our clients. And then how can we also just kind of take a look at what we can do within our own organizations to help with some of the uptick of calls that we're starting to see through our crisis line currently.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So this is Kathy from Orion, and I can speak for Orion. Diane and I were texting today. So
hi, Kathy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for asking the question. I think so. It is, how are we going to handle kind of the uptick in individuals that we're seeing, just to make sure I'm answering the right questions, right? And then the first piece of it, sorry, I'm blanking. It's been a very long day.
The first piece of it was it has to do with undocumented folks.
Undocumented. So in our training program, because we are paying individuals, they have to be documented. So we have to have individuals who have an I-9 that we can pay them, because we're paying them for their training program. In our process. So they get minimum wage when they walk day one in the door and engage in our services. So in that we become the employer of record. And so they have to be documented. We do work with a number of refugee and immigration programs. That's a big targeted outreach group for us. We just World Relief got some referrals from them. People have to be a US person. So we can't deal with people who are not, I'm going to use the wrong words, so forgive me, but are not eligible and permanent work eligible individuals here. So the has specific parameters through Department of Defense, and people have to show certain documentation to be able to come in. But that is a piece. If we do encounter individuals, we're looking at other resources. How do we link them with those programs that we know about that can really support them in that process? So those are really the pieces that we're out in the community and trying to engage individuals. I think the post-COVID world, and I think everybody would echo this, what we're going to see is we're seeing fewer people coming in the door right now. I think we're going to see more people as the summer comes to an end, as COVID, hopefully, not if you don't turn on the news, and I hope that we are seeing near the end of COVID, and that people can get back out in the community. We're able to get more outreach happening, in-person outreach. We've been working throughout the pandemic, doing the job training that we do and getting people jobs. But we're hoping we can get out and see people face to face and engage, because I think we get more information out there around who we are and what we do by engaging our community members face to face and letting them see. I also think as hopefully school starts back up, and I have 2 kids, so I feel the pain. And then we see unemployment shifts occurring, and we see fear of COVID really decreasing, then we'll see an uptick in individuals seeking the services, and we have capacity and we'll scale with that process. So did that answer?
Are you kind of getting prepared for what's ahead of us in the next few months when the moratorium is lifted?
So for us, it's going to be less the moratorium on kind of housing pieces. I think what we're going to see is an uptick because of unemployment benefits.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that is going to be, we're prepared. We have capacity. We have the staff. And then we're also talking what we're seeing right now in terms of the individuals we're supporting is much more significant mental health. And I think it's people with pre-existing mental health and behavioral health diagnoses, and who have just been traumatized by the past year, and it has exacerbated their struggles. They're experiencing being out. You know, if you had anxiety and then you went through the last year and a half, it's just it's a whole different game that we're dealing with. So we're trying to figure out what supports we provide at what point to make sure that we're supporting people in the right way to come in. So it's a dialogue we've had within our team a couple times in the past week and a half. We're really looking at how people are coming in and then exiting, and what those reasons are, and how we shift our support to match those. So yeah, it's an everyday conversation for sure. So thanks.
Thank you very much. If no one else, I'll pass it on to Councilmember Malenga.
And then I think Councilmember Brown, you have a question?
Thank you, Councilmember Malenga. Actually, I just wanted to comment very quickly. Number one, how appreciative I am of the work that you do, Joy Scott, in our community, helping to coordinate all this really important work that has to get done. And number two, I want to thank all of the social service provider organizations that are doing this work in our community. We're a better community for it. And we want to, I think I can speak for others on this council, we want to do whatever we can to be helpful to make sure this work continues. So thank you again for helping make us a better community.
So I'm looking at all the screens. I don't see any other hands raised. Does anybody have any last questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead. Excuse me?
Hi, this was just Adria from MSC. I just wanted to let you all know that we are also not only with our rental assistance program, but we will also have an ERAP program that will have a case manager and or 3 case managers working for that program in addition to our normal rental assistance for the end of the moratorium.
Oh, very interesting. Thank you so much for letting us know that.
You're very welcome.
Robin,
if there's no other questions. Yes.
Can I ask the lady that just spoke?
Yes.
I can't see her name.
Adria.
How long have you been in service and help and being here in Auburn?
Well, I've only been with, I'm very new with MSC. I've been there now with them for 2.5 years. But I've always worked in service. I worked prior to working with MSC, I worked for what we call a medical evaluation specialist, and we worked with injured L&I workers through the King County cities, assisting them with rental help, medical services, and different things like that.
Well, thank you for sharing all that, all the offerings that you have to offer the people in Auburn. You know, it was really, for me, it was really enlightening to hear everything you have to offer for our citizens. So thank you very much for your service, and continue working with you.
Thank you so very much.
Councilmember Stearns.
There we go. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can't help this. I'm sorry. For solid ground, you had mentioned that in the last period, none of the families returned to homelessness, which I think is just absolutely amazing. And I was wondering if you could, share with us, why is that? Why are you or were those families so successful?
Thank you. Yeah, we're pretty proud of that too. I don't know that I can point to exactly what it is, but I think that our team's efforts at designing a really individualized intervention, and particularly in the past 1.5 years since the pandemic hit, we've been really reticent not to graduate families from the program early. We want to make sure that folks are really at that stability point that they can take over control of the run on their own and be able to wield any short-term crisis that might come their way. I will say there is one point that's important to note about that stat that is a little challenging. So it's a hard thing to measure perfectly. What it comes from is our HMIS database, where we all enter information about our families who are experiencing homelessness. And if families return to the system, it would show up in HMIS. Sometimes there are times where people don't show up in an HMIS program again. So it might not be exactly that. I just like to be transparent and sharing that there's always that chance there's someone who's not actually entering the system, but they did have a negative exit. We try to stay in touch with people. So if we hear that, I think one other thing that helps make us successful is when families are graduating from the program, we let them know, hey, if you run into any trouble, reach back out to us. We might be able to link you with other services. Solid Ground has homelessness prevention services in-house, so we can do internal referrals to our partner programs within our agency if needed, if folks are facing rental barriers after they've graduated. So that is a big value add for us for sure.
Wow, well, thank you, and really thank you, Laura, and Solid Ground. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for all your questions and comments. Now I'd like to turn it back to Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Councilmember Olega. And once again, all of the partners, thank you for your partnerships with the city and for serving the folks here in Auburn and the work that you do on a daily basis. We greatly appreciate your involvement, your input, and your participation, and what we do to help people make lives better on a daily basis. So thank you all again for being here today. All right, Council, we'll now move into the agenda items for council discussion. And our first item on the agenda this evening is a limited update of the 2015 Comprehensive Water Plan. I believe we'll begin with Director Gall and then probably somebody else.
That is very true. So thank you. Tonight, I'm going to have Susan Fenhouse, our water utility engineer, go through a briefing with you of what the limited update is and why we need to do it, along with the water use efficiency program update that is also required as part of this limited update. So Susan.
Okay, just let me share my screen here for a moment. I believe I've got the right one here. We shall start the slideshow. Thank you, council members. Yes, tonight I'm going to talk about an extension request for our comprehensive water plan and the planning efforts that have gone into that. I'll also be talking about our water use efficiency program, which is an element of the comp plan. Public notice is an opportunity for the public to comment on both of these, and then our next steps. So the Washington Department of Health approved the city's 2015 comprehensive water plan in May of 2016. This is a 6-year approval, so our next plan will be due in May of 2022. The plan requires having 6-year and 20-year planning projections. And so while we were working on this plan, Department of Health was also in the process of changing the planning period requirement from 6 years to 10 years. So we incorporated a 10-year projection in our plan in anticipation of this change, which did go into effect after our plan was submitted. So Department of Health Directive Memorandum allows a water system to request a limited update of their comprehensive water plan when the existing plan still has useful life. So while our plan was approved for 6 years, it did include the 10-year planning projections. So we're requesting a 4-year extension of our current plan. And in the next couple slides, I'll show you our planning efforts for capital projects, water demand, and population. From 2015 to 2020, we completed 24 of the projects that are listed in the comp plan, totaling approximately $29 million. On this graph, the blue lines indicating projects completed, and what's shown is the total value of the project in the year it was completed, even though those costs may have been spread out over 2 or 3 years. And then the green bars show our proposed projects, which are in the current capital facility plan. Water demands were projected to have a steady increase over our planning period, but actual demands were quite a bit less. The top green line shown here is our maximum day demand projection, which we anticipated would be over 15 million gallons a day, with the red line below it being our actual maximum day demand. Our blue line being the average day demand projections, which we anticipated would be around 10 million gallons a day. We actually had, shown on the orange line below that, an average of about 7 million gallons a day. And we do anticipate that this trending will continue for the next few years. Our population for the water service area, we did project again to have a steady increase. However, and that's shown with the red line, the blue line is our actual. And we were pretty close projections to actual. And even though they are close, our water demands are still well below what we projected. So really there is no concern that we will be able to provide adequate water supply in the near term. Water conservation may be one of the reasons why our demand is not increasing at the same rate of our population. The water use efficiency program is a standalone program. However, we are incorporating it as part of our comp plan update to get approval for the water use efficiency program at the same time. The water use efficiency rule was established to promote good stewardship of the state's water resources and help ensure reliable long-term water supplies. So we are proposing some new goals for the 2021 to 2026 water use efficiency program that are a continuation of the goals set in the 2015 comp plan. Our first goal is to decrease residential water use by 1% each year. Currently, the average water use per residence is 179 gallons per day, and we hope to decrease this to 172 gallons per day per residence. We also look to decrease our peak summer water usage. We calculate a peaking factor that compares the ratio of the maximum day demand to our average day demand. And then our third goal is to maintain our distribution system leakage under 10%. So our calculated usage has been under 7% for the past 5 years. However, this does not mean that we have 7% of our system is leaking. This is unaccounted for water, or water that we do not bill for. And yes, some of it is leaks, but some of it is water that we use from hydrants for flushing or fires, or some water that we just use for operation and maintenance of our system. It's any water that we don't bill for. We are planning to implement some program measures to achieve these goals. We have a very active school outreach program with the help of a consultant. And being in the classroom teaching children is very effective. This past school year, our program was entirely virtual, but it was still very well received. We participate in Kids Day. We have an activity for them that does have a conservation message. And we've also had information at farmers markets in the past. New appliances and low water use fixtures are one of the greatest contributors to water conservation. We continue to provide low flow shower heads on request, and we do offer a rebate for residents who replace older toilets with low flow models. With our automated water meters, we are able to see hourly water usage. This helps us detect leaks quickly and provide notification to customers in a very timely manner. And early notification not only saves water, but it also saves money for the customer. So next week at the council meeting, we will receive comments from the public on both the water use efficiency program and on the limited update of the comprehensive water plan. We have resolutions for council to approve both of these documents. And then once approved, they will be submitted to the Department of Health for their review and approval. And finally, the comp plan will be part of the city's overall comp plan update that will go to council for adoption by the end of the year. And when all of this is done, then we very quickly get to start on a full comprehensive water plan update along with the city's plan that will go forward for approval in 2024. Oh, sorry, I was trying to not stop saving. Somehow I missed this.
Okay. Anything else, Susan, for now?
Nope.
Okay. Questions for Susan, Council? Let's see here. Councilmember Stearns, you still have your hand raised from before, or are you up for this one?
This one.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I just had a question about, you know, our setting goals for reducing water usage. And I was wondering, sort of what is our education program for, you know, watering lawns in the summertime? Is that like a big thing, or is that like not a big thing?
It's not extremely active. However, we have tried to have some messaging on the website. That's something that we maybe need to review again and do a little update on. But we do have something there for that type of thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I'm just curious. I live in an HOA, and they encourage us to water our lawns. And there may even be like a note or, you know, anyway, but I was thinking if that's something that, you know, maybe we could, I don't know, work with the HOAs just to say, you know, some of the lawns may be whatever, browner than you might like, but it's really for a good purpose. And I'm just not sure what to do, but anyway, I thought I'd raise it.
Okay.
Well, Susan, is there any plans to modify our projections based upon what the actual water usage has been over that period of time?
Not directly just for this limited update, but when we start our next full comp plan, we will be looking at all of that, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions for Susan, Council? All right. Susan, thank you very much, as always, for your presentation and your work.
Thank you.
Okay, Council, we will now move into ordinance number 6827 with Director Thomas.
Good evening, Council. I am here to present the second budget amendment for 2021 for your discussion and consideration, and we will be bringing hopefully an ordinance to you next week at the council meeting for an adoption. It's a pretty big budget amendment this time around. I'm going to share my screen. Oh. That's not it.
Maybe we can see your slideshow.
Oh, you can. Excellent. All right. I am seeing it on a different screen. I'm going to have IT come and help me every single time I've been doing this. I've been getting all my screens mixed up. So this is a pretty big budget amendment this time around, and because of that, I'm going to kind of go through a summarized version of all the elements. On page 155 of your council packet is where we'll actually kind of more of a narrative of each of these items. And then on page 162 of your agenda, we have much more detail of each of the items that I'm going to be going through tonight and how they impact each fund. But in general, to hit high level of all the items in our budget amendment for this evening, I'm going to start with the 5 major categories of this budget amendment. The first one is a fund balance adjustments of $21.8 million. We have some revenue adjustments, which is adding revenue to the budget of $8.4 million. Capital fund transfers that are related to previously approved capital projects of $3.1 million. New funding adjustments of $1.2 million, and then new requests of $1.5 million. And as I go through the slide, I'll talk a little bit about what each item is and why it's separated into a different kind of subcategory for our budget amendment purposes. So first is fund balance adjustments. This we typically do in the second quarter of each year to align our beginning fund balances with what our actual balances were at the end of the prior year. So once we have all of our accounting records closed, once we've passed audit and we are confident that our accounting records are accurate, we adjust our actual beginning fund balance with what we ended the year with. So when we did our 21-22 budget, we put an estimated beginning fund balance into, and that's what we adopted as part of our 21-22 budget, but that was back in September. And so things have changed since then. We actually completed the year, and this is just to true up our accounting records and our budget records at the same time. So the total adjustment is $21.8 million across 42 funds. The big funds that had the biggest adjustments was the general fund of $11.1 million. And you may recall when we did our fourth quarter financial quarterly report review, we talked a little bit about why the general fund did end up a little bit ahead of what we had originally estimated. A lot of that was due to the better than anticipated revenues. We had expected to see some bigger revenue decreases in 2020 related to COVID, and we had made many expenditure cuts across the general fund to compensate for those anticipated decreased revenues. Those decreased revenues didn't necessarily come to fruition, fortunately, but we did continue to maintain those cuts throughout the year, mostly in hiring freezes. And then we also received CARES money in 2020. And then we also did some revenue reallocation to bring revenue in from other funds and pulled it into the general fund, which we will be talking a little bit more about that revenue reallocation further on in the budget amendment. We ended, the cumulative reserve fund ended $2.2 million ahead. This was primarily due to the reason that we had in 2020 budgeted to transfer $4 million in cumulative reserves into the general fund. But as we got towards the end of the year, we realized we didn't need to transfer the full $4 million. We had only done one mid-year transfer of $2 million. So that is why the cumulative reserve fund ended a little over $2 million ahead of where we had originally budgeted. And then both the capital improvement funds and the water operating funds both ended ahead of what we had originally budgeted for. But then again, those were all related to the timing of capital projects. So capital projects that had been budgeted in 2020, they hadn't yet been completed until it had been carried forward into this year. And so that's why their ending fund balances were higher than originally budgeted. So that brings us to the second main component of the budget amendment, which is revenue adjustments. And our total adjustments accounted for new revenues that we hadn't anticipated when we had originally done the 21-22 budget. In the general fund, really the most significant changes were the addition of the streamlined sales tax mitigation money that has come back. We are anticipating $1 million for actual back tax into 2021. We'll likely be doing a budget amendment for 2022 to account for the streamlined sales tax in 2022 as well. Once we have a better idea of what we think that will be, we'll also true up those future year revenue projections with our fourth budget amendment of the year, or what we call our year-end budget amendment. So we'll pick that up in about November, December timeframe when we do that final budget amendment of the year. We are transferring $2 million out of the general fund to restore the cumulative reserve fund. As you noted, as we recall, I just had mentioned we had transferred $2 of the originally $4 million in budgeted money since in 2020 into the general fund. Since the general fund did end off in a more favorable position than we had anticipated, we're recommending to restore the cumulative reserve fund of the $2 million that we had transferred last year. We're also recommending we restore the REIT fund. So we brought in about $2.2 million in both utility tax revenue and motor vehicle excise tax revenue from our arterial street funds. And then we pulled that revenue into the general fund to backfill the projects that had been originally budgeted in the arterial street fund. We had used REIT money. So we're recommending to restore the REIT money from the new revenue that we had reallocated, or not new revenue, but the revenue that we had reallocated into the general fund last year. Adding to our revenues for the general fund is $48,000 through various grants, smaller parks grants for various programs in the Parks Department and activities and recreation programs. Other revenues, new revenues, are in our arterial streets funds. We are doing an increase of $200,000 for our fee in lieu of improvements. And these are for developer fees that are going to be used towards the Auburn Way South improvements. It's a road widening and sidewalk improvement between Hemlock and Poplar on Auburn Way. And then we also are recognizing a little over $2.7 million in new grants between our two arterial street funds for either new grant funding or grant funding above and beyond what we had anticipated, new grant funding, and then also an increased grant funding award that we had received for a project that had originally exceeded our original project estimates. The third component of the budget amendment is capital fund transfers. There's a total of $3.1 million that we are adding to the budget. And this is really just moving money from operating funds into capital project funds. They're for 14 projects that had originally been budgeted in 2021. And those projects automatically roll over, the expenditure side of those projects automatically roll over into 2021 since they were already previously approved by the council. However, the funding source, if it came from an operating fund, those transfers from one fund to another don't automatically roll over. We need council authority to roll over the transfer amount from the operating fund into the capital fund. So again, these are all related to projects that the council has already approved, and they're just incomplete projects from 2020 that are still being completed and worked on in 2021. The fourth component of our second budget amendment is funding adjustments. So these are previously approved programs by the council. There's already something existing in the budget, but we are requesting enhancements to those projects. The first one in the general fund is for the golf course, a total of $140,000 to add a part-time customer service employee to the pro shop and for miscellaneous repairs and maintenance around the golf course. This is really due to the increased traffic at the golf course over the last year and some kind of deferred maintenance and repairs that had needed to be done sooner rather than later because of the increased activity. Both of those items, which total $140,000, will be funded with green fee collections, the higher than anticipated green fee collections that we saw both last year as well as the first half of this year so far. Then we're also asking to add $275,000 for the day and night shelter that is operated by the Auburn Food Bank. You may recall back in January, we came to the council to adopt a contract with the Auburn Food Bank to provide both of those day and night shelter services. We knew that we needed to follow up with the budget amendments, but there were several other pieces that we were trying to tie up with the Auburn Resource Center as well as the day and night shelter. And we wanted to make sure that we were looking at the whole program, what our total costs needed would be compared to what our actual budget is. And so that is why we're now catching up in the second budget amendment for those day and night shelter contracts. $275,000 is the total of both of those contracts for the year with the Auburn Food Bank. Then the other funding adjustment requests are for general governmental capital. One of those is the 104th Avenue Park Development Project for $770,000. We're requesting that we use park impact fees for the difference. This was a project that had originally been estimated to cost a little over $1 million, and the most current estimate now for that project is $1.9 million. So with the cost of construction being a little bit higher right now, we do need to ask for an increase in order to complete the project, and then using the park impact fees for the difference. There's the arterial pedestrian bicycle safety program for an additional $130,000 we would like to add to the program. We would be using fund balance. That fund balance actually comes from the funding that we received from King County in 2020. So we'd received that additional funding from King County in 2020. It flowed into fund balance, one of the reasons why we're making a fund balance adjustment. And then we'll be using that fund balance to pay for the additional costs of the program. And then the last additional funding for our capital improvement project is the LED lighting on city-owned parking lots. We are requesting to use the last little bit of local revitalization bond revenue that we have left of $34,000. And that would be to update the lighting in both the B Street parking lot and the B Street Plaza. And then last but not least are the new requests that we are asking for. In the general fund, I'd mentioned earlier the day and night shelter services with the Auburn Food Bank, but we would also like to add some of our own funding to the Auburn Resource Center, totaling $225,000. Part of this, most of it, is related to the actual costs for the utilities and daily operation costs of running the resource center. And then another piece, $75,000 would be for the costs of architect and engineering costs associated with doing tenant improvements in that building. And then once we have the architectural and engineering piece done, there will likely be a later request for the actual tenant improvements themselves to that building in order for us to accommodate sublessees in that space to provide a variety of resources for residents. We are also asking to add $105,000 for new membership fees and new studies. 51,000 for the BOLA wrap devices. These are less lethal options that can be used by the police department to help encourage, help de-escalate situations and immobilize suspects in a less lethal manner. They are compliant with the new legislation and the use of force legislation laws that are now in place, and hopefully this will help the police department in those efforts. In addition, $40,000 for a paved trail repair. It's a trail that has become in disrepair. It doesn't really fall under the Parks program or the Public Works program. So it is something that our property management division is requesting to repair just to help prevent liability on that particular path. We are also asking to add to general governmental capital, accelerating the A Street Loop project by a year. So that's a $400,000 project. It's been previously approved. We're asking to accelerate it though and move it from future budgets and pull it into 2021. And then some miscellaneous park improvements of $177,500. In the utilities fund and our inner fund and some of our inner service funds, we're asking to add 1 FTE for an administrative specialist in maintenance and operations. The total cost is $31,500. That's the additional cost. We currently have a temporary non-permanent position. To convert that position to an actual FTE, the difference would be $31,500. This would be a position they'll be working in our fleet maintenance department, but would be funded by our utilities because they would be working on the utility vehicles and supporting the utility funds. And then also $150,000 from the stormwater fund for a sidewalk cleaning vehicle to clean moss and debris from pervious spaces to help keep the stormwater system clear and clean. For the vehicle replacement fund, we have 2 new requests, one for a crisis negotiations van of $133,000. This would actually be paid really a combination of 3 ways. One, with existing money in the vehicle equipment replacement fund. There isn't the full amount available in that fund to replace the van now, but there is some. We'd also use a little bit of our drug seizure money and then a little bit from the general fund to pay for the full van. The van, not only is it used in crisis negotiations, but it's also used in drug enforcement and SWAT operations as well, which is why we would be using some of the drug seizure fund money for the purchase of the vehicle. And then an additional $74,900 for police vehicle replacements. This is really to cover the overage of costs associated with the vehicles that both we were replacing in 2020 as well as 2021. Vehicle costs just far exceeded what we had originally budgeted for those replacements, and so we need additional funding for that. So a quick summary of what this budget amendment 2 looks like and how it impacts our fund balances for both the general fund as well as all other funds combined. You can see what our amended fund balance, our budgeted amended fund balance for the general fund was a little over $10 million. We're proposing to add a little over $11 million in beginning fund balance, $1.2 million in new revenue, and then adding $5.2 million in expenditures for an adjusted budgeted ending fund balance of $17.1 million for the general fund. And then all other funds combined, so that includes all the capital projects that I had mentioned, as well as our utility funds and our internal service funds. Our 2021 budgeted amended fund balance began at $96.4 million. We're proposing to add a little over $10.6 million to the beginning fund balances, adding $11.6 million in new revenue and $9 million in offsetting expenditures for a total adjusted ending fund balance of $109.7 million. So with that, I will open it up to any questions that you may have.
Also, questions for Jamie on budget amendment number 2?
Councilmember Stearns has raised his hand.
Councilmember Stearns, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Jamie. This is pretty thorough. Really appreciate that. I was just, if you could remind me, so when the 275 for the resource center, so that I guess what I'm trying to remember is we started out with 0. Is that sort of where we started from? So we're just adding 275 to 0. Is that correct?
No. So in the past, we've had $500,000 budgeted really for the entire housing outreach, humans, kind of that human services division. And over the last, really pretty intensely over the last 6 months, we've been really working on how do we organize all of the services that we actually provide and how much does that actually cost us, and consolidating them all into one division. And historically, we've had been under budgeted for all of the services that we've provided. So right now we're trying to make it really more transparent and more organized, all of the services that we're doing. So that $275,000, it would have normally been paid out of that general bucket of $500,000, a very unspecific bucket of $500,000. But when you start adding up all of the services and all of the costs associated with it, it actually far exceeds $500,000. So that is the reason for needing the budget amendment.
Okay, so then what is the actual total cost for the resource center?
Well, it's last year it was a little over, I think we ended up paying about $700,000. We were in the $700,000 to $800,000 range. We had several things going on. That was our lease for the Auburn Resource Center, as well as the day and night shelter. We also have encampment cleanup costs and other various costs kind of going towards that effort. This year is a little bit different because we've added the community court piece as well. And but offsetting a lot of that is some subtenant revenue. So the Auburn Food Bank has began paying their portion for operating the food bank out of that space. So we have some offsetting revenue for the also increased costs that we've seen this year as well.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying it's around 775,000.
Yeah, we'll probably be coming forward with more requests if we start doing actual tenant improvements at the community at the resource center. And that would be, again, to get more subtenants and really enhance the services that we're providing there, getting that space to provide more services. So $700,000 to $800,000 on that, on all those services, but we do have offsetting revenue currently as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, and the money well spent.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
Any other questions, council? All right, Jamie, not seeing any. Thank you for the presentation. And it's nice to see our streamlined sales tax back and other revenue sources that are proving to do the job we expected them to do. So appreciate all the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, council, we will now move into ordinance number 6830. And I believe we have Assistant Chief Collier with us this evening.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So this ordinance, to give you some background, we currently have policies in place and body cameras in place with the department, only with a few units. And so the way the state law reads is that if we move to fully outfit the department with body cameras, the RCW strongly encourages the city to adopt ordinances basically authorizing the police department to use body cameras. And then it also would allow us to have the police advisory committee help us and recommend any changes to our policy as they see fit to make sure that we're in compliance and to make sure that we're being transparent with our community on how we use them.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Questions for Assistant Chief Collier, Council? Councilmember Stearns.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to make sure, I think something, I want to make sure I'm correct. So we had a presentation last week, and it was by a specific company, Axon, right? Who manufactures body cameras. But we're not, is the contract just with Axon, or is it open to other bidders?
So this ordinance allows us to go out for RFP. Axon is just one vendor. We do have certain requirements for the RFP, the request for proposal, that we will be putting out if the council approves this ordinance. So they are just one vendor right now.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Baggett.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was wondering, is there a projected cost, total cost associated with this ordinance when it gets actually adopted and we fund it?
So there is a cost depending on the proposals. After we put it out for proposals, there will be a cost to council. We haven't obviously put it out for official proposals yet, but there'd be a cost both for equipment, technology support, and potentially staff, depending on the redaction that comes with the body cams when they're released on public records. So yeah, there will be a cost associated with it.
Okay. Does this also include the tasers as well?
So our RFP that we will be putting out does include tasers. We're looking to add that in one budget item. We will be coming back to council once the RFP is completed in budget amendment number 3 later this year with the full cost.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Trout-Manuel.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor DeCoursey. Mark, about how many cameras are going to be fitted on the police officers? Is it everyone that's on shift? Are they by shift, or how many are we going to be getting?
So the RFP that we will be putting out is for 123 cameras. That includes officers, our animal control and parking control, and it will include also replacing the cameras that we currently have in our vehicles.
And that's including the tasers along with the cameras, right? Body cameras?
Yes, the taser is included in the proposal as well. We are currently budgeted for tasers under a separate ordinance from several years ago, but this is, it's coming up at the end of life, and so we are doing the RFP for everything at once.
Thank you.
Any other questions, council? All right, Assistant Chief Collier, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, council, last item on our agenda items for discussion this evening is resolution number 5605, and Director Tate.
Thank you. Good evening again. So resolution number 5605, first of all, that starts on page 182 of your packet. That's where the agenda bill is. This should look pretty familiar. First of all, I presented this item back on April 26th to City Council during a previous study session to talk about an interlocal agreement opportunity that's been developing on the Pierce County side of our city over the last couple of years. And you may remember me referring to an organization that has been named now called SHAPE, which is South Sound Housing Affordability Partners. There's more A's in there, so it's not just affordability. But SHAPE is an organization that's trying to form for the purposes of addressing affordable housing issues in Pierce County. The interlocal agreement that's attached to resolution number 5605 largely models the interlocal agreement that City Council authorized the mayor to enter into for SKIP. One thing that I think is particularly different, notable difference with the SHAPE organization or the SHAPE interlocal agreement is that it's county-wide. So it includes Pierce County and then any and all cities within Pierce County that choose to opt in. Recall that for SKIP, we were really trying to design approaches that were applicable to South King County. So in SKIP, there were 9 cities in the south end, as well as King County itself. So for SHAPE, it's Pierce County and all cities within Pierce County. So I won't go through the interlocal agreement in detail because I know that City Council is quite familiar with SKIP, and it is attempting to form the same sort of organization and the same sort of efforts around affordable housing in Pierce County. I will say that the budget contribution for membership within SHAPE is based upon population, just like it is for SKIP, but our population in Pierce County is quite low compared to the rest of the city. So under the different budget scenarios that you would see in the interlocal agreement, our budget impact for membership would be between $2,000 a year and $5,434 a year. So pretty affordable participation in a very noble effort. And what we're seeking to do is bring forward this resolution and the interlocal agreement to City Council for consideration at next week's August 2nd City Council meeting. With that, I'll answer questions.
Questions for Director Tate on SHAPE? Well, Jeff, looks like we're in pretty good shape. So no questions. Sorry for the pun.
Pun is great.
Yes, it is. So very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Council, any other discussion items this evening? Any new business? Okay, Council, we do have a executive session we need to attend this evening. So we are going to recess to an executive session that will include the mayor, city attorney, assistant chief of police, and council members to discuss potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, subsection 1, subsection I. The executive session is expected to last 15 minutes. So council members, if you'll please log out of this session and log into the executive session, we will see you there. We are recessing to executive session. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, we have a quorum. You go ahead and reconvene the meeting.
Thank you, Sean. All right, Council, we will call the council study session back to order. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.